Hi, I'm Paul Marcel. Well, the next phase of my vanity project is to turn this stack of drawer parts into drawers. Now, if you've seen the previous episodes, we've already resawn this hard maple and drum sanded it flat. I already ripped it to the width for the particular slots that they're going into, ran a groove in there for the bottom panel, and then cut them to their appropriate lengths. So really what's missing out of this whole stack is turning them into drawers by doing the corner joinery. Now I'd like to dovetail these drawers together. I have 6 drawers to do, and I was thinking of doing them 6 different ways by hand. Now when I say 6 different ways, so sometimes we're going to do pins first and sometimes we're going to do tails first. We're going to use a Western saw, or we might end up using a Japanese saw. Sometimes we're just going to use a fistful of chisels to go and clear out all the waste, and other times we're going to use the chisels coupled with a fret saw. And then we're also going to do some strictly off the saw. Now what we're not going to be using are things like this for laying out where the pins and tails go, or these for setting the angles. We're just going to eyeball all that, and we're certainly not going to be using a rubber chicken. So I ventured ahead in time a little bit and brought back the first drawer that we're going to put together. This is the top drawer here on the bottom part of the vanity, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to discuss a little bit about the drawer anatomy itself so that you can see how it affects the layout of dovetails itself, and then just some of the other interesting parts of a drawer. I mean, we open them all the time, but do you really sit there and look at them? I never do. So the rest of this video is going to talk about the anatomy of a drawer, to talk about where the grooves go, why this is thinner, why that affects the layout of the dovetails, stuff that has nothing to do with particular styles of doing the joinery. The other videos are going to talk about, say, doing pins first versus tails first, and then which types of saws you're using, how you want to clear it out, maybe little tips along the way of how to do that. And those are going to be done separately so that you can kind of pick and choose the ones that you're interested in. So if you're very comfortable with a particular technique but are interested to see what the other one's about, you can just jump directly to that video. Makes it a little bit easier. Now the initial 2 videos on joinery are going to be for basic dovetail joinery. I have a couple other videos that are planned afterwards that are going to be for other drawers on here that are going to be a little bit special, and I think you're really going to like those. So now for my drawers, the front material is made out of mahogany while the rest of it is made out of hard maple. The reason for the mahogany is because I'm going to be taking mahogany that's been sculpted and I'm going to be applying it to this front. Now I want it so that it's going to look like a solid piece of mahogany after I'm done doing the application, and I don't want it really to be like mahogany that's stuck onto maple. That can look okay in certain applications, but that's not what I want here, so I've chosen to make the fronts out of mahogany. Now the sides and the back are made out of hard maple simply because it's relatively inexpensive compared to the mahogany, but also it's a very hard-wearing wood. This is going to run for a long time without getting soft, getting dings, any problem like that, so there's no issue for that. In fact, these styles are actually just a little bit below the runners. The runners are made out of poplar, which is also a hard-wearing wood, with the idea that this way here, as the drawers are run in and out, it's not going to wear any type of a little ding here on the mahogany. It's going to stay strictly on that poplar and wear much, much better without affecting the look of the rest of the cabinet. Now the stock that I prepared for the drawers, actually, I already placed a groove in the bottom. Now this groove is for a panel that's going to go into the bottom to form the drawer bottom. So I like to run the groove ahead of time before I do the joinery, simply because, well, for one thing, it's easy to know which side is the inside of the drawer, so you don't get that mix-up where you're putting the pins facing the wrong direction. But also, you need to know the width of this groove and also its exact placement, because you're going to need to put a tail in order to hide this groove that would be exposed on the side. Now say this is the front of the drawer. If I put the side of the drawer in and I put it in such a way that there isn't a part of this side covering up the gap, well, of course you're going to see the gap, and that's not going to look good at all. So you want to make it that this sideboard, which sideboards are tail boards, has a tail that's going to appear right over top of this hole, right? Because you're going to cut in here and make a socket for that tail, that the tail is going to fit over top of this groove, effectively blocking it like this so that you don't see the hole. Now, of course, you're going to see one from the front, but you're okay about that because you're going to be placing an applied front to it. Now this is a sample board I did almost a year ago now, and it's just been sitting in the garage, but it came in useful. So see, never throw things away. So this side piece is, of course, like the side of a drawer. So it's got the tails on them, and you can see that down here you don't see a groove on the front of this because I've placed this tail down far enough that the groove that's over here is not poking out the side. So there's the groove here. It's actually only on the side. I don't have one on the mahogany, but if there was one, it would be at the same position. Well, this tail has the groove in it, so you can see that poking out the front. So that's just the placement of it. So that's one of the reasons why it's nice to have the groove in your drawer stock already, because of the way that you're going to be placing it. Now one interesting thing about this drawer is that there seems to be a part of it missing here. That's actually in the back, and it's intentional. What it is basically where the groove for the panel goes in, it is able to come out of the back. So in a sense, you could take a panel like this, if it was the ply birch. Now, this is a really bad piece. I use it as a zero clearance insert on my bandsaw. But for drill, you could slide it in from the back all the way into the drawer, and it can slide back out through the back. So the bottom is actually not captured permanently in the drawer. You'd be able to remove it. Now, in the case of something like ply, you could actually not cut this part here off. You could leave it there and trap the board inside. So in that case, it's kind of like you're making a frame and panel door using a really stable piece of ply, so you don't have to worry about motion. You just leave a little bit of a gap and you're okay. Now, in the case of hardwood, though, that wouldn't work, and that's why this type of a cutout was invented. So this is actually a tabletop I have lying around here, but it shows it's a little easier for you to see what I'm talking about. This is a hardwood panel, and if I were to use this inside of a drawer, normally what you would do is you would bevel the edges, kind of like this tabletop is beveled, so that what happens is that this is thinner than the whole size groove you would need to support this entire top. So you would normally have this going in, and it would slide into the groove all the way up to the front. Now, it turns out that because the groove is fairly big in here for my ply, it actually would work with this panel. So it would fit in like that. Yet the panel itself is thicker. It makes for a very robust drawer bottom, even though the edge is considerably thinner. The panel itself, being hardwood, if this is the grain going across here, it's going to expand and contract across the width of its grain. So this distance here on this table is not really going to change much through the seasons. This is going to change. So if you're putting it in a drawer, you're going to want to make sure that you put it in a certain way to account for that motion. If you were to put the drawer so that the grain went from the front to the back, this way it's going to expand across the width of the drawer. Well, there's no room in here for the expansion and contraction, so it's going to blow out the sides, or at least very much bind the sides to the side of the inside of the cabinet. So you put it this way so the grain is parallel to the front of the drawer. That's why we have this open area in the back, is so that the panel will be able to slide out and pull back in off the back. So all the expansion and contraction is taken up by the back. Now, of course, you could make this bottom very much like you can a frame and panel door, in the sense that these grooves could be deep enough that they can actually take up the expansion and contraction. But typically that means that you're going to have very thick sides, and nobody really likes the thick sides. I mean, these ones here are actually a little thicker than I sometimes use. But you would have to have some pretty thick sides and front and back in order to have enough room in the groove to be able to absorb all that motion. So this is typically what's done. Now, why am I bringing that up here? Because this affects your joinery. If you take a look at a regular side, you're going to have a half pin on the bottom and a half pin on the top, and then of course a layout of other pins, a pin here and a pin here. If we go to the back, it's a little harder to see because of the white on white, but you have a half pin here. On the front, the half pin is down here. And of course now you're spreading out the other two pins in a smaller area. So in a way, the joinery, the layout that you have on the front and the layout on the back are different. You may still have three tails, but they're going to be different sides. So that's also why I find it nice to have the groove in ahead of time, because then you can actually cut this piece off ahead of time, and it's much easier when you're doing your joinery. You don't have to mark a lot of pencil lines for future cuts. You can just get them done right away while you're doing all the other dimensioning in the first place.